Hello, my name is Christi Scarrow. Welcome to Messy Leadership, where we talk about the hard stuff in managing people. And I'm really excited today to welcome Jennifer Braganza. She's the VP of Operational Excellence at Pontoon Solutions. So thank you very much for being here, Jen.
Thank you for having me.
So I got a few core questions to ask you about, starting with sort of your leadership journey and maybe what you learned in your career early days or as you've evolved as a leader that's helped shape who you are today.
What a great question. So, my leadership journey probably started as a student when I was in high school and college. I was passionate about these things. In my case, I was passionate about the environment. That was something really, really important to me. And I had to get other people on board. And so, the first thing I learned about leadership was how to get people as excited about things as you were. And so, when I was in high school, I actually started a new club that was for the environment. And then in college, took on some leadership roles. And I think for me, one of the hardest things to learn about leadership was that you sometimes fail at it, right? That it's not, you're not perfect right out of the gate. You mess up a lot. And if you're doing it right, you take a moment to reflect and learn about what went wrong, and then you try again. So leadership is not, from my perspective, is not something that will ever be perfect. It's a practice that you take on every day. And as you engage with different people and different challenges, leadership looks different.
Totally. And I'm actually interested, as you said, getting people on board is something that you are passionate about, which is one of the core challenges I know leaders have is getting people behind the purpose of the organization or the goals. What were some of the things you did to get people, engaged and as interested as you were?
I think at the end of the day, you have to find what's important to other people and connect it to what's important to them. You're not going to necessarily spark something new. But generally speaking, if you think about whether it's an organizational goal or whether it's a community goal, there's something that's in it for everyone. And so it's connecting it to that person. And then also accepting that sometimes people aren't the right fit and being okay with moving on. Not everyone is going to be passionate about the same things that you are. There's a funny, I think it's a YouTube or TED Talk video about the first follower and how important that role is. The first person that you bring on board is what really makes you a leader because you have a follower. And so this idea of finding that first follower who is as passionate as you are is more important than trying to convince someone that they should follow you. So I'd say some of it is just selection as well.
That's really interesting. We'll have to see if we can find a link to that to share with the listeners because that would be really interesting to see. And I like that idea that if you've got somebody who's equally passionate, then it's much easier than trying to convince someone to jump on board for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it's important to take the time to recognize people as well. At the end of the day, whether it's the workplace or I've spent a lot of time volunteering with nonprofit organizations on issues I care about. Appreciation is really important to people. People want to feel that they are seen, that they are heard, that when they do things that is appreciated. And one of my favorite traditions is we start team meetings with recognition. And I lead a global team. And every time we get together once a month, we start with recognition and we allow everyone who wants to recognize their peers. And I always remind people that recognition is timely, it's concrete. It's not the thank you, everyone, for all of your contributions. Nobody feels warm fuzzies from that. Recognition has to be timely. It needs to be, you did a really good job with this. I really like how you handled this situation. I've seen you grow in this way. I learned something from you when you did this. It's being as specific as you can. And it changes us as well. I'm now a parent. I adopted a little girl this summer. And one of the things they teach you as a parent, even, is you should spend more time recognizing the good things because that automatically helps them want to do those, and try to give less attention to the not so good things, right? Like spend more time recognizing people. And there's stats out there about how many times you need to say something good to kind of compensate for a negative comment. But at the end of the day, if we think of ourselves as leaders as being our mission is to help grow and develop our people in order to meet a leadership goal, then how do you grow people? You grow people with sunshine and water, right? Like you have to be giving people some sunshine. Sometimes there's water. Sometimes you need to help constructively build somebody up and help them grow. Constructive criticism is also really important. If we never get feedback, we never grow. But we also need to take the time to give people the sunshine, which is the recognition when they do something well, when you see them do a hard thing, just being able to take that moment and say, I saw you today. I saw you do that hard thing, but also building it into our systems and structures in our organization. It's not just hoping people will remember, but creating those moments in team calls at the end of a month, reminding people to send recognition to the people who've helped them be successful that month. However that looks for you and your team, I think it's an important part of how you keep people engaged in their own journey with your organization.
There was so much great stuff you just shared there. And for me, when you talked about recognition, it was specificity. It was the fact that I think what was important is you said you had peers recognizing peers, as opposed to sometimes there's a belief as a leader that you have to be the one to go around recognizing everybody. And certainly you can role model that and it's important. But if you're actually setting the environment and allowing people to recognize each other and encouraging them to continue to do that and focusing on, as you said, the positive. I love that analogy of the sunshine, because I think we sometimes forget that and we pour a little bit too much water on people and then they drown. And I'm building on your analogy, but I love it. I love it. And welcome to motherhood, because I can tell you, I've learned a lot of lessons from my kids, and there's a lot of parallels between parenting and leadership that I think are great lessons. So that's awesome. I want to turn to, and that's another question, just, you said in the beginning, it's a journey on leadership. It's never perfect. That's why I believe leadership is messy. So what are some of the things that are still challenging for you today as a leader? What are some strategies that you use to try to overcome it?
Great question. So I'll highlight two. The first is I think sometimes we forget as leaders that we're always being watched and people read into things we do. And there's so many examples of this, but I'm always shocked by my team when I find out that somebody was intimidated to meet with me. So I'm like, I'm not an intimidating person. Why would you be intimidated to meet me? Half the time I spend skip level calls talking about really random things. But I do skip levels. So I meet with my whole team. Obviously, I meet with my directs regularly, but then I also try to make sure I meet everybody in my organization on a regular basis. And in those conversations, I can tell sometimes at the beginning of a call that somebody is nervous to talk to me. And I'm always stunned, right? So I think just recognizing that as a leader, you have a position and people are watching you and they're taking their cues from you. One of the things I had to realize was sometimes my face gives people a reaction that I don't intend. Like somebody will share an idea. And if I want to build an organization that's constantly thinking of ways to improve, I cannot react when I think something is a bad idea, because everybody in the room doesn't know why I think that's a bad idea. They just saw me react to somebody sharing an idea. And so learning how to react in those moments, like training your brain to say, that's an interesting idea. What would be your next step in flushing that out? And putting it back on the person, like, okay, so I don't really understand why you think this is a good idea. It might be what's going through my head. But the reality is I don't know everything. And so making sure that I'm giving my team the opportunity to flesh out their ideas and learning those little things. And I still mess up at this, by the way. Sometimes I send a short answer and I say no. And then I don't realize that the person has taken that to be like, I was rude or I was upset that they bothered me or whatever the case might be. So I think we need to recognize as leaders that people read into the things that we do. And we really need to be focused on building trust with our teams and being transparent so they know, hey, sorry, I was in a hurry, wanted to get you an answer as fast as I could. Apologies if that came across as abrupt. But recognizing that that happens. The second thing I've learned as a leader as I've started building teams is how important it is to build a team and not find that outstanding talent. You know, as I've interviewed, I've met people who I'm just like, wow, you are amazing. Like, if this was the NBA, there's no doubt everyone would know your name. Like, you are phenomenal. And then I take a step back and I look at how this person would fit in my team. And I realize they may not be the best fit for my team. If you're familiar with the movie, I think it's Moneyball with Brad Pitt, right? He really focused on not getting the best players, but building the best team. And I think sometimes as leaders, we forget how important that is. Before I make every hire, I take a look at my team and I look at what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses, where are we incredibly diverse, and where are we maybe a little too homogeneous. And that's in, you know, personalities, locations, experiences, yes, you know, other demographics like race and gender, but it's in all of the different ways that we bring ourselves to work. And I take a look at that and I say, okay, it would be great if we could find somebody who brings this to our team. We need more of this. And that's part of what I look for when I'm making a hire. And sometimes that means that I'm not hiring the shining star. It means I might be hiring someone who has a more experience or in a specific area. So I think as leaders, we really need to think about building teams when we're making hires and looking for what completes our team. And I don't use the word best fit loosely because I think that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. But when I'm thinking about fit, I'm really thinking about sometimes like who's going to challenge the team? Who's going to take them out of their comfort zone? Right. So fit really means like for the purpose that you're trying to fulfill, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I like the way you've described that because I recognize that challenge of we've always gone from this idea of hire for cultural fit, hire for cultural fit. And then as you said, sometimes that turns into everybody who thinks the same, or we assimilate somebody as soon as they come in to be just like us. And that's not really the intention. It's sort of so I like how you've said the fit for purpose or form for purpose. It makes a lot of sense. I would like to get just a build perspective from you if you could. Hiring for diversity, I love your perspective on it. But if you have a team or an intact team already, any ideas on how to ensure that you're not acting in a way that's completely, that group think that sometimes happens within almost really strong teams, right? Is there any ideas you have on how to encourage diversity of thought when in an existing team without hiring?
So great question. My background is in design thinking and facilitation. So one of the things we do on our team is we rarely do discussions because in a discussion, everyone is listening for what the leaders say, and they're subconsciously or not, they're then their ideas are starting to down select to what aligns to what leaders or other smart people, influencers in the group are. So you can use tools like Menti as an example, but technology to get people to brainstorm on their own before they even see any other output from the group. And that's where you truly see a divergence of thought. And then you can start asking questions like, well, that's interesting. Why do we think this? That's interesting. Why do we think this? Okay, what's our next? How do we build off that? So if you think about design thinking, you always want to start with divergent thought. And so just giving people a safe spot, because in Menti, for example, the ideas are anonymous. So they don't know which idea is my idea or one of my leaders' ideas. Every idea on that page is equal. So things like that, where you take away a little bit of the role or authority of a person. And then, going back to what I said earlier, leaders need to be aware that they need to be quiet.
Mm.
If you speak first, and it's really easy to be the person who speaks first, if you speak first, you shape the conversation to what you want it to be. And in some cases, that might be what you're trying to do. But if you really want to avoid groupthink, then you need to be quiet and you need to speak last.
Yeah, I'm a facilitator myself, and so I've used Menti or I'll use post-it notes to kind of get that divergent thinking. But I don't think I think it's great because it doesn't have to be a facilitated external perspective within teams themselves. How are you as a leader always thinking about how do we get that? How do we avoid already coming to my, for my framework as a leader? And you're right. Sometimes leaders, I think, feel like they have to be the first one to share and the first one to talk because they're the leader. They're supposed to know. But if they're instead quiet, you're probably going to get a better, broader perspective from the group. That's a great thought process. So the last question I have, and obviously you've already given great advice, but just for folks that struggle to manage people, they're maybe earlier in their career, maybe they're later and they're still struggling with how to manage others. What advice might you give to them in this moment?
I think you have to figure out what your focus is. So I have managers underneath me who are very results oriented. And so they're constantly focused on, is this person producing? If they're not producing the outcome that we're looking for, then I've got to focus on that. And then you have some managers who are more focused on person development and growth, and where is this person on their journey? Where do they want to go? At the end of the day, leadership has to be adaptable to the person that you are leading. So I don't use the same style with everyone on my team because it wouldn't work. And this is the challenge of having a diverse team is people expect different things than from their leader. And you have to figure out how to be authentic to who you are and yet still meet the needs of your people. So the first thing I would say is recognize that leadership is adaptable. And then the second is be honest and ask questions. I used to jokingly give my leaders, like people I worked for, when I started working for them, I would give them a how to handle me conversation because I'm not like a lot of other people. And if they treated me that way, it was going to demotivate me. And so I would walk into one of my first meetings with a new manager and I would say, here's who I am. Here's what works well for me. If you have negative or constructive feedback, here's how I can receive that. If you want me to do something different, here's the way that I best receive that. And I think the more you can get your people to tell you how they are enabled to be successful, how they take feedback and then meet that need, that I think is what makes you a good leader when it comes to people management. And empower your people. Find ways to empower them, find ways to let them drive their own work. There's some really interesting research out there about what it takes to keep people engaged. And a lot of it has to do with autonomy and flexibility. So where can you let your folks make their own decisions? Where could you say, hey, why don't you spend some time thinking about that? And let's get together tomorrow afternoon and think through some of those ideas that you've come up with instead of saying, here's how I want you to do it. So
Yeah.
I think there's lots of different things like that, just small little things that can change the tone that you have when you're engaging with your team.
That how to handle me piece is so interesting. And what it made me think about is teachers actually get this right. So you'll come down that path, but teachers often at the very first week, they're like, tell us a little bit about your strengths and weaknesses. And they have the kids reflect on it and they have the parents share. And I see that quite frequently because they're kind of going, I know every kid in my class is different, and I'm probably going to have a good understanding of what some of the challenges are, but we definitely don't do that as well in corporate. We come in, as I said, it tends to be you got to figure out how to fit in, and there's the fear of looking stupid when you're trying to figure things out, and there's a and you said there's miscommunication sometimes about what someone's intent is, because if you drop a quick email or something, they're like, oh, that wasn't, I'm feeling this way about it. So I love that you're setting the scene, and that simplicity of a leader can encourage people, tell me this because I want to do it. And if you're not, you can provide it to your manager as well. So anybody can participate in that kind of activity, or they can share a bit more about how feedback and probably how to be recognized, works well for them. This is,
Exactly.
I like sort of the nuance of how to handle me, kind of, because it comes from a humble place a little bit, recognizing like I'm going to be different and that's okay. And this is the best way to interact with me.
And you can do that as a leader. You can tell your team that as well. And I often will tell my team, look, I love interactions. I love conversation, but when I'm task oriented, I sometimes am very quick. Please don't take that the wrong way. I'm just focused on something And then I'll circle back later and be like, how was your weekend? And so just letting people know that that's your style when it happens, they're like, yep. And then when, an hour later, I'm like, hey, by the way, how was your weekend? Yep, she said that that's what she does. And lo and behold, that's what she did, right? So I think just being more clear about who we are and our styles helps people recognize them when they see it. And we can do
Yeah.
that for our people just like they can do it for us.
Yeah, and as you said, then you can start recognizing others because I'd be similar to you. I'd be like, let's get right to it. And I have people I work with that I know we can just get right to it. Neither one of us is going to be worried that we didn't say, how was your weekend?
Yes,
Whereas with somebody else, I will start there because I know that that is going to, how they want to ease into it. It's going to be more important to have that. But even then saying when I'm in a space like this is, I can't be that person sometimes, right? Even though I'm trying to be for you.
exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I've really enjoyed the conversation. I've learned a lot. So I want to thank you very much for your time. I want to say to the listeners, if you're looking for ways to navigate messy leadership in your life, you can find links to resources in the show notes, and you can find me at christiscarrow.com. So thank you again, Jen, for your time.
It was my pleasure.